Calling the president. Lucy's audacious phone call and the invitation to Washington. The decision to telephone the White House is pure Lucy Carmichael distilled to its most characteristic essence. In the quiet aftermath of the Cub Scouts' admiration for their finished sugar cube replica, the living room of the Carmichael-Bagley household becomes the launching pad for an act of civic optimism so audacious that it borders on the sublime. Lucille Ball's Lucy does not hesitate, does not consult a directory, does not pause to consider the improbability of the enterprise. She simply announces her intention with the calm certainty of a woman who has already decided that the machinery of the federal government will rearrange itself around the needs of Den 8. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call the White House," she declares, and the line lands with the force of a curtain rising on the next act of a comic opera. Vivian Bagley's response is the necessary counterpoint, the voice of the audience's own reasonable skepticism given warm, affectionate form. "I can only hope that you mean the White House cafeteria," she replies, and the understatement is perfect. Vivian has lived with Lucy long enough to know that the gap between a casual suggestion and an actual long-distance call to the most famous address in America is, for her friend, no gap at all. The exchange establishes the tonal architecture of the entire sequence. Lucy's unshakable belief that the world is essentially friendly and responsive, set against Vivian's more grounded awareness that the world has rules, protocols, and operators who may not immediately understand a request for the White House from a suburban den mother in Danfield, New York. When Lucy lifts the receiver and addresses the operator, the script enters a realm of pure period delight. "Operator, would you please get me the White House?" "No, I don't mean the White House cafeteria. I mean the White House in Washington, D.C. "Yes. I'll speak to anyone. My number is Klondike 54320. The telephone number itself is a small masterpiece of historical texture. In the early 1960s, exchanges such as Klondike still carried the flavor of local identity, a remnant of an era when telephone numbers were spoken aloud with a mixture of letters and digits. The detail anchors the fantasy in the concrete reality of rotary dials and human operators, reminding the audience that this is not a modern world of instantaneous digital connection, but a world in which every long-distance call still required a degree of human intercession and verbal precision. The operator's apparent confusion and Lucy's patient clarification generate the first gentle wave of comedy. Lucy is not rude. She is simply relentless in her clarity. She will not be diverted to a cafeteria. She wants the real White House, the one that sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the one whose portico and columns her Cub Scouts have so painstakingly recreated in sugar. When the connection is finally made and the ringing begins, Vivian's reaction. "This is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. My whole life is delivered with the weary affection of a woman who has watched Lucy attempt the impossible so many times that the only remaining surprise is how often the impossible begins to yield." The moment of contact is handled with exquisite comic timing. "Hello, is this the White House?" Lucy asks, and then turning to Vivian with the triumphant glow of a successful explorer, she announces, "Viv, it's really the White House." "No kidding." The phrase "no kidding" is pure ball, a vernacular stamp of authenticity that collapses the distance between the ordinary living room and the seat of national power. Lucy identifies herself with the precision of a woman who understands that credentials matter. This is Mrs. Lucy Carmichael Den, mother of Cub Scout Den 8 in Danfield, New York. She does not claim to represent a political organization or a civic association of any particular influence. She represents a group of small boys who have spent weeks transforming household sugar into architecture. That fact in her mind is sufficient introduction. The request itself is a model of polite presumption. Lucy explains that the Cub Scouts will be in Washington over the weekend and that they would like to stop in and present the president with a little gift, a replica of the White House made entirely of sugar cubes. The phrase, "a little gift," is deliciously understated. The model is large enough to cause serious logistical problems on a train, yet Lucy presents it as a modest token of youthful goodwill. When she confirms that the boys made it themselves, the moral weight of the offering increases. This is not a purchased souvenir. It is the product of children's labor and den mother supervision. In the cultural climate of the early Kennedy years, when the White House was frequently presented as a place of youth energy and cultural openness, Lucy's assumption that such a gift would be welcomed feels almost reasonable. The subsequent exchange, in which Lucy appears to speak first with a staff member and then to her own astonishment with the president himself, is one of the sequence's comic high points. The transcript's rendering of the president's use of the word replicator becomes the decisive proof of authenticity. "Viv, it was him," Lucy declares. "Are you sure?" Vivian asks. "Who else in the White House would say replicator?" The joke is gentle, affectionate, and perfectly calibrated. It does not require the audience to believe that John F. Kennedy himself would use so awkward a term. It simply uses the slight verbal oddity as a comic marker of officialdom. Lucy's conviction is absolute, and that conviction is the engine of the scene. When Vivian is drawn into the conversation and introduces herself as Vivian Bagley, den mother of Den 8, the partnership between the two women is reaffirmed. They are not merely friends. They are co-conspirators, in the best sense jointly responsible for the boys and jointly committed to the success of the project. The negotiation of the appointment is handled with the swift efficiency of classic sitcom construction. Saturday morning at 8 o'clock is proposed and accepted. The hour is early enough to be slightly inconvenient, yet Lucy accepts it without hesitation. "We'll be there," she promises, and the promise carries the full weight of her determination. The emotional aftermath of the call is pure Lucy. "We're going to meet the president. I'll never wash this phone again," she announces, and the line is both comic and strangely touching. The telephone has become a sacred relic, a physical link between the ordinary world of Danfield and the extraordinary world of presidential hospitality. Ball's delivery, as always, would have combined absolute sincerity with a glint of self-aware absurdity. The audience is invited to laugh at the exaggeration while simultaneously recognizing the genuine thrill that underlies it. Throughout the sequence, the script maintains a delicate balance between the improbable and the emotionally truthful. Lucy's belief that the president would welcome a sugar cube White House is on its face preposterous. Yet the belief is rooted in a deeper and more attractive conviction that handmade objects created by children carry a moral authority that transcends protocol and that the institutions of American democracy are at their best, accessible to ordinary citizens who approach them with sincerity and goodwill. In the early 1960s, when the Kennedy administration cultivated an image of openness and cultural engagement, Lucy's assumption was not entirely without cultural support. The White House of that era did in fact receive an extraordinary number of gifts from citizens, and the first family's public embrace of the arts and of youthful energy made Lucy's fantasy feel, if not realistic, at least tonally consistent with the national mood. The physical performance implied by the dialogue is equally important. Lucille Ball's face, as generations of viewers know, was an instrument of almost unlimited expressive range. One can imagine the succession of expressions that would have accompanied the call. The initial determination as she lifts the receiver, the patient clarity as she corrects the operator, the rising excitement as the connection is made, mixture of awe and triumph as she realizes she is speaking to the president, and the final glowing satisfaction as the appointment is secured. Vivian Vance's reactions would have provided the perfect foil: raised eyebrows, half-suppressed smiles, the occasional glance toward the audience that says, "Can you believe this is happening?" The chemistry between the two actresses, already legendary by the time of The Lucy Show, is fully operational. In this sequence, the Cub Scouts themselves remain present in the background of the scene even when they are not speaking. Their earlier questions about the real White House and the possibility of meeting the president have created the emotional context for Lucy's call. She is not acting solely on her own impulse. She is responding to the boys' disappointment and transforming that disappointment into opportunity. The sugar cube model, which began as a project designed to teach the boys about their government, has now become the means by which they may actually encounter that government in the person of its highest official. The educational purpose of the Cub Scout program is thus fulfilled in the most literal and unexpected way imaginable. The sequence also offers a quiet commentary on the role of women in the civic life of the early 1960s. Lucy and Vivian are not political actors in any formal sense. They are den mothers, housewives, and neighbors, yet they possess the confidence to pick up a telephone and request an audience with the president on behalf of the children in their care. The request is granted at least within the comic logic of the episode. The implication is clear. The institutions of American democracy are not the exclusive property of professional politicians or powerful interest groups. They belong in some measure to anyone with the courage to ask and the sincerity to offer a gift made by children's hands. As the call concludes, and Lucy hangs up the receiver, the living room is charged with a new energy. The Sugar Cube White House is no longer merely a completed project. It is a presidential gift with an appointment attached. The weekend trip to Washington has acquired a new and far more significant purpose. The logistical challenges that will soon arise. The difficulty of transporting the oversized model. The disaster that will befall it on the train. The desperate quest for replacement sugar cubes are already latent in the triumphant mood of this moment. Lucy has secured the appointment. Now she must deliver the gift. The distance between those two facts will become the source of the episode's richest physical comedy. In the larger architecture of The Lucy Show, this sequence occupies a special place. It demonstrates the series' ability to move fluidly between the domestic and the national, between the ordinary and the extraordinary, without ever losing its essential warmth or its commitment to character. Lucy Carmichael is not a woman who seeks power or recognition for its own sake. She seeks experiences that will enrich the lives of the children in her care and that will incidentally provide her with the kind of adventure that makes everyday life worth living. The telephone call to the White House is both a maternal act and an act of pure personal exuberance. That combination is the signature of the character and of the actress who created her. The scene ends with Lucy's declaration that she will never wash the telephone again. The line is comic, yet it also captures something essential about the way memorable experiences imprint themselves upon ordinary objects. The telephone has become a relic of the moment, when the distance between Danfield and Washington collapsed, when a den mother's request was heard, and when a sugar cube White House acquired a presidential appointment. In the world of The Lucy Show, such moments are not rare. They are the natural consequence of living with Lucy Carmichael's particular brand of hopeful determination. Thus, the sequence completes its work. The ambitious project of the Cub Scouts has been elevated to the level of national ceremony. The partnership between Lucy and Vivian has been reaffirmed in the shared adventure of the telephone call. The audience has been prepared for the cascade of comic complications that will follow, and Lucille Ball's Lucy has once again demonstrated that the most powerful force in American comedy is not cynicism or satire, but an unshakable belief that the world, if approached with sufficient sincerity and sufficient sugar cubes, will eventually open its doors.